You're listening to the Music Business Breakthrough Podcast with me, your host, Grammy-nominated artist and certified trauma-informed success coach, Cheryl B. Engelhardt. I founded In the Key of Success to help musicians like you fast-track the process of setting and achieving big goals. Whether you need to release some past baggage or break through the BS of the music industry, you're in the right place to level up how you release your music into the world. So let's go get your music business breakthrough and amplify your release. I'm your host, Cheryl B. Engelhardt. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. If you're someone who has tried all of the things and you're like, I can't figure out what's stopping me. I've done all of the marketing things. I've done all of the release things. This is going to be an episode that may blow your mind. I talk a lot about this concept of your commitment versus your default in my mastermind Amplify and in my retreat Amplimansion. We do a lot of deep dives there, and this conversation is one that people come back to me over and over again and say, that has changed my life. So dig in with me in your commitment and your default. So when we notice that we are self-sabotaging, and sometimes we don't even notice, but it's the idea that you're not getting the results that you want. Period, end of story. Usually it's not because you need some big marketing tip or you need to figure out if AI is bad or not, or you need a chatbot. No, usually there's something about you that's very subconscious that is getting in the way. And so we're going to identify what that is and then replace it with something way more powerful. So here we go. The first thing we need to notice is what is our default way of being when we are triggered or when we feel threatened or when we feel like there's something big coming up. So we kick into a survival mode that we learned when we were really, really little, usually under the age of 10. And we kick into that mode mostly because it has worked and it has served us. At some point, though, that default way of being is just a little kid response, and we don't want our music business to be run by a little kid, right? So we're going to identify what that is, and then once we notice it, we get to put it aside and replace it with something better, because the universe hates a vacuum. So that's why we've got to do the commitment part of this. So we're going to start with, what is this knee-jerk default way of being? So this is going to be a great episode to take notes or just think about and come back to later. So the first couple questions I'm going to ask you are all about how to identify this default, this sort of icky way of being. And it does feel icky, just FYI. And that's okay. So just be prepared to say, okay, I'm going to shine a light on a couple little shadow parts of myself. And although I may not like it, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We are going to replace it with something that is also true to you and aligned with you. And it's just going to light up the world when we discover it. So the default, let's figure out what that is. This is usually a statement, like a command. So the way to identify it, think about a recent situation, doesn't have to do with your music career, any situation that has frustrated you, or a person that has frustrated you, or a scenario. And if you were a 4-year-old and you were given permission to have a total tantrum about it, what would you stomp around and yell? At the person, at the scenario, at the situation? What would you do? So think about that for a second. I'm going to give you a couple examples. I wanted you to think about it before I throw out some examples, but some are, I'm out of here, or I can fix it, or why did you do it that way? I know better, or I'm better than you, right? They start to get a little like, you're like, oh, I don't want that to be a thing. It's okay. It's okay. We all have this. I'll share that mine is I can't be bothered. So I have like a lazy default. And by the way, we each have a couple of them. But my biggest one is I can fix it. My default, I can fix it, really served me when I was working in recording studios as an intern, and when I was a tech at a jingle house. I was the person literally hired to fix things. And oftentimes, in all of those spaces, I was the only female. So I had something to prove. I had a bunch of guys looking like, you know, Patch Bay, you know, I'm not just sitting here because this is pretty. I'm home here. This is very comfortable to me. And so fixing things became a survival mechanism for me. It became a way to get recognized. It became a way to get respect. So that default stuck with me for a long time. I started to notice that it was no longer serving me in my relationships. If the relationship was good, I would start a fight. I didn't even know I was doing this because if there's nothing to fix, how can my default exist? How can that part of me have a role in my life if I'm not fixing something? So I'm the person that can walk into a room, and if there's nothing broken, I'll break something. Not literally, but figuratively. And I started to realize that that was not working anymore. Hence, this work being so powerful. So, did you figure out what your statement is, your command or the tantrum statement? A way to check it is think about a different situation in your life, completely separate from the first situation you thought of, that's also frustrating or something that makes you sad or angry. Would you want to say the same thing or a version of the same thing? So once you identify this statement, this default, this way of being, this part of you, we're going to put it aside. Now we've got a little bit of room to say, okay, that may not be working for me anymore. How can I put something else in here? So I'm going to ask you 4 questions. And these 4 questions are going to allow you to answer the question, who are you? What is your mission? What are you committed to? What are your values? All of these questions will be answered by the statement that we're going to craft during the next part of this episode. The first question I have for you to start to determine your commitment is, what if you were in a room with 100 people that all knew and loved you very much? What would they say when you enter? Oh, yay, so-and-so is here. Now I get to feel, fill in the blank. What are all of those people saying about you? What is fact? What is known about you? You don't need to know these people. You don't need to think specific people in your life. And you may not know, but take a guess. We all have a hunch about how people see the best version of us, or how we want them to see the best version of us. Whether or not that version is really small because our default is so big, it doesn't matter. What is that part of you that people love when you walk into a room? For me, it's, oh, Cheryl's here. I'm going to feel inspired. I'm going to feel entertained. I'm going to laugh. I'm going to be heard. I'm going to be seen. Those are the things that I think a room full of people would experience when I walk into the room. So what is that for you? The second part of this first question is, now imagine sitting with one person. It doesn't matter who, and you're having an intimate conversation, not a romantic conversation, an intimate conversation where you're both really seeing each other. What is that person getting out of that conversation with you? What are they feeling? What are they experiencing? Think about that for a second. It can be similar to what the whole room is thinking and feeling when you walk into the room. But it could be something like they're feeling peace, they're feeling relaxed, they're feeling their authentic selves. What are they feeling? What are they experiencing being in your presence? The second question now is, what do you experience when you see that you're having that impact on them? Let's say that you declared for yourself that when you're in conversation with someone that and being the best version of yourself, you're really seeing someone and letting them be fully who they are, total acceptance. When you see that they're getting to experience that total acceptance, what's happening for you? Do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel joy? Find some words, jot some words down. We're trying to play a semantics game eventually, which is to find the words that you're going to describe your commitment statement. So what goes on for you? So to recap so far, we've got 100 people in a room. What are they saying when you enter? The best version of yourself is entering the room. When you're in an intimate conversation with one person, what are they experiencing? And what are you experiencing? So gather all of those words. And now we'll move on to the third question. Why music? You cannot say because it's the only thing I know, because I have to. What is it about music, really? What do you feel? So use feeling words here. This is going to help a lot. What is it about creating, producing, whatever you do with the music that has you do this for your living or your part-time living or for the long haul or to invest? Why do you do music? What do you get out of it? You get to be selfish here. Like, what is it that you get? You get to feel loved. You get to feel seen. You get to be fully self-expressed. What is it about music? And the final question is, you got to get ready for this one, because the first thing that pops into your mind is the answer. You name it, I have heard the answers. Crazy, silly, dirty, you name it, I have heard the answers to this. So no judgment around what is the first thing that pops into your head. What do you love to do more than anything on earth? What is your favorite thing to do? And the second part of that is why? What do you feel? What do you experience when you're doing that thing? And it doesn't have to be music related at all. What is it about that thing? So now look at all of these words. Is there a theme? Is there something about connection? Is there something about authenticity? What you want to do is gather these words so that you can create a very simple statement about who you are as a person. And I'll share mine. Mine is, and it's been this way for 13 years. I keep thinking I'm going to change it, but it really still embodies everything about who I am. Is I am committed to self-expression, partnership, and creativity. Those three things are my compass for everything. And it takes a minute to sort of embody those words and to be able to have them roll off your tongue. I can now say that I've done it in podcast interviews. People are like, so what do you do? How do you decide what jobs to take? And I'm like, well, they have to check 3 boxes. I have to be fully self-expressed, and I need to be a space to provide that for someone else. Creativity, I need to feel creative, and I also need to make sure that whoever I'm collaborating with feels that. And partnership, there needs to be an equal partnership happening. That is the basis for everything that I do. It's a beautiful compass. And these 3 words for me, or 3 phrases, are not just what I'm experiencing, but it's what I'm committed to other people experiencing. So I would say have no more than 3 words. This is not about what you do, because even if I was a bank teller, I could be committed to self-expression, partnership, and creativity, right? So don't get caught up in the doing. You want to find some feeling words. This is the space that you're creating, and make sure that the words you're choosing are not byproducts of other commitments. I once worked with a coaching client who really thought that they were committed to connection, and like intimacy was all about relational stuff. And what we realized was they were really just a love bug, and their commitment was to love. Because when love is present, connection and intimacy, all of those other things are present. So you can ask yourself that question. If X is present, what happens with Y? Or if I'm committed to Y, what is present? And you can see which one is a byproduct and which one is actually the core when we peel back the onion layers. Cool? We want to define that there's a very strong difference between your default and your commitment. They are not opposites. You don't want to have a commitment that is, I go with the flow and don't try to fix things, because then the default is still present inside the language of the commitment. You want to be completely independent of the default. I'm going to share a story about how you use this in your life. Many years ago, my husband was mountain biking with his brother, who is a professional mountain biker, and he got into a really bad accident, and he broke his back and scapula, and he was in Maine and I was in New York, and so I had to get myself to this hospital in the middle of Maine and see how he was doing. He had a punctured lung, all this stuff. And I was at the double doors of the hospital, and I was going to go in, and I was like, all right, what insurance? And I was in my default. I was like, how do we fix it? We've got to fix this. We were about to go away and rent out our house and rent some. So I was like, I need doctor's forms for Airbnb. And like, I had all of the to-dos, right? And that like hustle energy. And it was all about fixing it. And at the double doors, I was like, wait, what am I committed to? Partnership, self-expression, and creativity. And none of those things can coexist with my default. Your commitment cannot coexist with your default. I cannot be someone who walks into a room and says, I can fix it, I can fix you, and be committed to partnership. There's no room for creativity, and they're not self-expressed for sure, and I'm not self-expressed. That's just my default saying all the things, right? So I paused at the double doors, caught it, almost real time, which is the work to do, is keep practicing it. I worked with a coach for a long time to have that muscle get really developed. And I was able to walk in and then partner with the doctors and get creative with my husband. I was like, this is what we're going to do while you're recovering. And really listen and be a space for self-expression for everyone around me. All right, this was a big one. We're going to talk more about your commitment as we move forward. It really is a great way to identify what you want in your life. So when we start talking about goals and setting goals and achieving goals and making action plans and marketing plans and all the music business stuff, knowing what your commitment is going to be so important. So I'm so glad that we got this episode in early. If you want to go way deeper with me. We talk about this stuff all the time in my membership Amplify. Check it out at www.inthekey.co/amplify and make sure that you've downloaded the free app Releasify, because that app gives you a ton of resources that touch on all of this stuff. I'll see you in the next episode.